So we are live again. The Russian hackers must have found out about this Facebook Live and decided to stop us. So my question was about, the report suggested that he has been copying the files for several weeks. So why would he release all the, million secret files rather than selecting the specific ones that he, claims were for the public good?
Right. Well, I think, coming back, I can't get into his head other than I would say he has many of the traits of traditional traders, and I'll go into that in a second. But my thought is that he just wanted to cause as much damage as he could to the national security system and leak every document that he possibly could. So it wasn't that he was upset with a single issue. As we go back and look at it, I've seen no real changes made since, since his expose, if you will. I mean, there have been some minor things around how many layers can you go back on a phone number. There's also a perception and misperception with many, many people that were the U.S. government sitting there listening to your phone calls. That's not what this was, it's largely about is with a legal order from the FISA court, can you go in and get telephone information about the origin of the call and the numbers of the people making the calls? This is particularly valuable in doing terrorist. For example, the one that just took place in New York and New Jersey. I mean, you want to see how that phone is hooked up to other phones. I mean, the Khan has traveled to Afghanistan and Pakistan, and you want to know who he's in touch with and his network, if he has one here in the United States. So it is that type of information that the NSA is looking for. They really don't care whether or not your social life is a bit eccentric. So I think people want privacy, but they're missing the national security picture. I mean, it just, honestly, I don't know how one can envision. I'd like that someone explain to me how you envision running a government without secrets. So you have a rogue employee who takes off with whatever he decides he wants to release and goes to two of our biggest adversaries, two adversaries that are existentially threatening, and you share that information with them. I mean, if anyone believes he hasn't done that, then I think they need to go back and read more espionage books in the history of the Cold War and how people operate in this space. Nothing's free. You don't go to Russia and live there free. His meals, what he says, what he can say, everything is screened. So, I hope he does come back, and what he should do is come back and face a court and get the full measure of the responsibility of the prosecuting office to prosecute him. And if there, for whatever reason, one were to conclude, a jury, that he was innocent, then so be it. But you can't give him a pardon. I mean, this is a very sophisticated amount of information. You're just going to arbitrarily report him because we've made a movie about him, or you have a segment of the population that is so sensitive to privacy that anything goes. Then I think in the age of terrorism and big power struggles, it's extraordinarily naive, unprecedented in its naivete.
In your article for Politico magazine, you said Snowden is the kind of guy I used to recruit in Russia.
Right. Well, let's take a look not only at Russia, but take a look at Rick Ames and Robert Hansen, two spies here in the United States. One was in the FBI, the other was in the CIA. Ames I knew reasonably well, and he was in CIA. And when you look at their mindset, what do you have? You have people that are underachievers, but have a very high self-esteem, particularly with their intellectual capabilities. They all think they're smarter than everybody else. And so did Snowden. Now, Snowden was a dropout in school, and an underperformer. I think lazy would be kind, but certainly in the case of Rick Games that would apply. But they get in trouble with the system because they think they're so smart and the system's not awarding them properly and they're not getting the respect that they want. And it's in this space of disgruntlement between your narcissism and your self-evaluation and how others view you, particularly your supervisors, and the system evaluates you. And in that space is where treachery takes place. It is for these reasons that people tend to betray their country more than even the ideological issues. So if you look at the profile of Snowden, I mean, he doesn't have a track record of any significance or importance, and he ends up by a fluke. And again, there's criticism here of how does somebody of his limited capabilities end up as in a computer center with access to all the information, the hub where all information flows. I mean, somebody was asleep if you lose the pun at the switch. So you had a mediocre person in a place where they had access to information and had a career that was going nowhere.
So, as you mentioned, U.S. had multiple cases of spies like Aldrich Ames and Robert Hansen. However, they sold their secrets, national secrets, whereas Snowden revealed the secrets willingly. Does it make his crime any lesser?
Well, many of the Russian spies, and even when you look at Hansen and Ames, it's not all about the money. And in the Russian cases, it was always combinations of factors. And part of it, they didn't like the system, but there was almost inevitably issues of why they were mad at the system. They wanted to strike out at the system. And I think that's what we have with Snowden. He wants to strike out against the system. In the Soviet Union, you don't have a lot of, back in those days, you didn't have a lot of options about due process and getting it squared away or addressing the issue. In the case of the United States, you have due process. You can take it to court. You can take it inside the systems. You can get relief. And if you really feel so upset about it, you stand up and release the information, allow yourself to be prosecuted in court. And if you're such an innocent person and the information is so overwhelmingly egregious, then you will get a pass by the court. My guess is. But he didn't do that. He didn't stand up and be counted. He took off. So...
there is also a debate, whether he was a senior advisor, as he claims he was, to the NSA, or...
no, he was a mediocre, I don't know the grade, but let me take a quick guess at GS 12 or 13. And
so he was no trained spy.
That would be like a lieutenant in the Army. And he was not an advisor to anybody on anything. He was a technician. He did. I think he graduated from high school. We're not even sure about that. I think he did. But this isn't somebody with an advanced education and somebody that's steeped in international affairs. I mean, he's a wannabe. Wanted to be a big shot. A lot of psychological things going on there. I would love to see him subjected to a very careful psychoanalysis.
That would take some time.
Well, he might be an obvious case for a good psychiatrist. I don't know, but advisor. I mean, I think there's a lot on the public record that demonstrates that is not the case. He didn't have those types of credentials. Now he might be an advisor to the Russians and the Chinese.
Well, did you know that
advice on how to penetrate our system?
That since he he fled to Russia, that they recently, a couple of months ago, approved a law called Yarovaya package, which is basically a set of laws allowing the control of all the internet communications. So basically, even harsher surveillance.
Oh, right. If Snowden thinks that the Russian system is more democratic and open and less invasive, then we not only have a psychological issue, we have an IQ problem.
Right. In terms of last question, his escape to I guess he was planning an escape to South America, but landed in Russia. But how do you, as a former spy yourself, how do you grade his pretty successful fleeing?
Well, I think if you are under suspicion and you escape the FBI net and foreign intelligence networks, then you would get reasonably good grades. However, in his case, he wasn't under suspicion until it was too late. In other words, it would be like anybody in the federal government, and traveling internationally. I mean, how hard is that? And it's certainly not hard to get to Hong Kong. So, so he wasn't evading. It wasn't like they were surveilling him. The case of E. Howard Lee is a different story. E. Howard Lee was an American who in the CIA was fired, and he knew way too much. That's a whole story of how to handle that. But he was under suspicion and was able to evade apprehension. So I guess you would give him better grades. Snowden, it was a no-brainer. There's no spy clandestinity here. I mean, he took his material with him, and he didn't shake the FBI or use false documentation. He did what he did, and he can talk about going to South America or whatever, but he knew he had to go to some place where he wasn't going to be extricated.
So your verdict seems clear.
I hope so. I hope it's very clear that, I hope he comes back and he's prosecuted fairly and squarely in the our judicial system, which I still have high regard for, the best system in the world as far as I'm concerned, not without its flaws, but it's hard to make some a similar comparison with the Russian system or the Chinese or most of the world for that matter. So I hope he does come back. Where he's winning the battle is where he may actually have lost some. The movie may give him a few more points in the poll, but I thought he had a lot of momentum and was winning the PR battle. I think we here at home may have been a little too slow to characterize him properly at the beginning. But I mean, I think there is in the United States a feeling that he was somehow a hero. But I think that's losing strength. I notice when I do public speaking, when he first went on the run, the first few questions I would get would be about Snowden, and then it slowly disappeared. And I think there's less enthusiasm. And again, it depends on the different demographic and age groups. But the movie, I refuse to go see it, but it'll glorify him somehow.
It's actually extremely boring. It's probably the most boring spy movie there is.
That's pretty damning, if I must say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because there's not much of a spy story. You basically have a guy who jumps ship and hands over his information. So there's no backstreet alleys working in place for
But
years.
Oliver Stone, he could have made it, one of the main dramatists. He could have made it a thrilling, full of adrenaline story, but it was just completely boring and plain.
Yeah, I've always thought of his productions as sort of propagandistic sort of things, but it sounds like he did. In the past, he's been able to get readership on it. Whether it was Lee Harvey Oswald or I think he maybe even done something on Chile. I forgot who did Missing. It may not have been him, but the facts and presenting an objective view. I don't think that's his hallmark.
Well, thank you so much, Jack. I hope we'll talk to you soon again on some interesting issues.
Well, thanks for having me on. Very interesting subject. And again, I'll be, I can't tell you how upset I'll be if he's ever granted amnesty.
I doubt that.
I doubt it too. I doubt it, but we live in funny times. Anyway, Masha, thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Bye, Jack.